Madam President, I thank you most sincerely for the opportunity to contribute to this bill. Before I begin, Madam President, I want to join with my colleagues of this Senate and congratulate our newly minted Attorney General on his first contribution in this most esteemed and honorable chamber. Madam President, I am excited by the prospects this modern, forward-thinking legislation will bring to the society and economy of our twin islands of Trinidad and Tobago. You know, Madam President, I recall being in Tunapuna in 2020 on a political platform, on the political hustings, and saying to Trinidad and Tobago then, to the ganja farmer, the ganja user, God bless. Now, and this, Madam President, was when we amended the Dangerous Drugs Act. Now, Madam President, 2 years later, with pride, I can say to Trinidad and Tobago, you don't have to dread to be Rasta because this is not a dreadlock thing. This is a divine conception of the heart. It takes me back to Morgan heritage, Madam President, and I will tell you why. Because what we are doing today is not a Rastafarian thing alone. This particular bill that appears before this Honourable Senate is now a diversification thing. It's an economic thing. It's a medicinal thing. It's an export thing. It is something that stands to contribute significantly, Madam President, to the society and the economy of Trinidad and Tobago. That being said, Madam President, it will be absurd of me not to salute the Honourable Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago for being a forward-thinking political leader. Sir, I bow before you today in this Honourable Senate because it is through your leadership we are here as a Senate to debate this forward-thinking piece of legislation. Now, Madam President, in my contribution, I would like to focus on Part 8 of the bill as it relates to inspectors. And, of course, in doing that, I will address some of the concerns that the Honourable Senator Lakshmi Dayal raised relative to the issue of constitutionality. Madam President, if time permits, I would want to also look at what I perceive as the potential of a black market cannabis trade that may be developed, and of course how this bill will be able to treat with same. And again, if time permits, Madam President, in my contribution, I would also look at administrative fines, clause 64 of the bill particularly. But before I jump into the crux of my presentation, Madam President, there are a couple of things that I would have to address as it relates to the contribution made by the Honourable Senator, Senator Lakshmi Dayal, and this is for the purpose of the record, Madam President. Now, Madam President, Senator Lakshmi Dayal, in her presentation, raised the issue of dispensing of cannabis for medicinal purposes and the presence of cannabis products where there are minors. Most respectfully, Madam President, and to those present in this honourable chamber, what the Honourable Senator has failed to consider is that this falls squarely, Madam President, under the remit of parental responsibility. Even Section 35 and 36 of the Children's Act, Madam President, speaks of exposing a child to a dangerous drug, which carries, as we all are aware, a penalty of $5,000 and imprisonment of 9 months. So certainly, this is my attempt to debunk that concern or that submission made by the Honourable Senator. Senator Lakshmi Dayal, Madam President, also stated that the requirement for a license are so stringent that they are far beyond the reach of a small farmer. But, Madam President, even the small man, as we are aware, when we look at this bill clearly, is afforded a fair chance, Madam President, of applying and securing a license. Madam President, I submit to this country equity is given to all applicants as there is no onerous threshold, Madam President, to be met to satisfy eligibility. Now, clause 30, Madam President, is referred. The person, and clause 30 in this particular bill is referred. The person must be able to show that he is above the age of majority or a permanent resident of this country, a CARICOM citizen, or a company, firm, partnership, cooperative, and for the religious aspect, an NGO. So it is absurd to be saying and placing on the public record that the small farm or the small man will be locked out from making a said application, Madam President. And of course, for the purpose of the record, it was necessary for me to state that. In addition, Madam President, the Honourable Senator also stated that religious bodies need to be regulated as NPOs. Madam President, I would like to remind the Honourable Senator that the current Non-Profit Organisation Act 2019 mandates that NPOs must be registered. The mandatory registration, Madam President, was transposed to the proposed law. Now, this is seen where the controller of the religious organisation, Madam President, may, on behalf of the religious organization, apply for a license under the proposed section 29(3), where the said religious organization is registered under the NPO Act. And if we look at, okay, let's say B, the documents for the organization in registering that the cannabis is for religious purposes. So in the actual registration of a religious, or in the actual registration process of a religious organization, the current application to register anybody as a NPO, you would have to expressly be able to make that declaration stating same. So there are checks and balances in place in other operational pieces of law, certainly at the Office of the Attorney General and the Ministry of Legal Affairs, when those applications are made to register NPO. I know particularly, and I could place on the record, our Registrar General and her team are particular and keen in combing through these applications. And Madam President, for the benefit of the viewing and listening public, this is one way in which we can ensure, and there are measures that have already been put into place to ensure that no person or entity just decide that they want to register an organization for religious purposes. Now, Madam President, there were some other points made by the Honourable Senator. The Honourable Senator, Madam President, Honourable Senator Lakshmi Dayal, she spoke of an investment being made in rehabilitation, and the Honourable Senator also identified her dissatisfaction that the regulations are not here before us today. In essence, the Honourable Senator called this bill a shell. Most respectfully, Madam President, what we have today is a 68-clause bill. How can we say that this bill is a shell? So therefore, I totally denounce that statement made by the Honourable Senator. Now, the Honourable Senator also in her presentation made the point that she believed that an investment ought to be made in rehabilitation. And now, don't get me wrong, Madam President, I too believe that rehabilitation is critical, but I personally believe, Madam President, this ought not to be legislated at this time. My reason for this is because we would need to give the industry, Madam President, a time to establish and flourish before it is prescribed in legislation that this said industry is now called upon to make some sort of investment in rehabilitation. Now, Madam President, I also want to remind the Honourable Senator and take this Honourable Chamber to Clause 6.2 of the bill that appears before us. In Clause 6.2, the authority, it says, inter alia, that the authority shall be managed by a board. Now, that board shall comprise, and if we look at that 6.2, Madam President, it says that the board shall comprise of persons appointed by the President and so on, and it lists the persons, the kind of skill set that would be sitting on this board. We're looking at someone with 5 years experience in law, management, finance, medicine, scientific research, agriculture, law enforcement, education, and drug or rehabilitation. So in response to the Honourable Senator's concern that we have not prescribed in the bill that appears before us some sort of provision for rehabilitation, I respectfully submit this is where the board, who is going to be charged with the responsibility of directing the authority, creating policies and so on, based on the composition of that board, the skill set of that board, we would have the opportunity of that person who who is versed in drug or rehabilitation to be able to create policies that would treat with that issue. And therefore, respectfully, Madam President, it is my personal view that at this stage, an investment, we should not legislate in the bill that appears before us that, there ought to be a rehabilitative investment. Now, concerns, the Honourable Senator did raise medical concerns and manufacturing and export concerns. Madam President, respectfully, I will bat in my crease and I will leave those technical areas to be addressed by my more experienced and learned colleagues who I know will follow and deal with those issues in their contribution. Now, so I would have already dealt with the Honourable Senator's concern about the religious organization. One thing I want to place on the record, Madam President, if and when this authority is established, we must remember, and this is especially for the benefit of our viewing and listening public, this authority does not, existing law, Madam President, does not disappear because we now have an authority being placed. The Dangerous Drugs Act is still in existence. And other criminal law as it relates to the abuse of drugs and any criminal activity is still very much alive and well. So therefore, we cannot expect that the current bill that appears before us is certainly not going to deal with criminal activity in its entirety. We have to remember that there are other good written law in our books that would be used if and should any person who holds a license pursuant to this bill commits a criminal offense. So, Madam President, those were just a few things that I wanted to address for the public, for the purpose of the record that the Honourable Senator Lakshmi Dayal would have raised. And I particularly, in my contribution, Madam President, I would be looking at, God willing, I'd be looking at Part 8, which is the inspectors and the roles of the inspectors. And my hope is that during that contribution, and during that explanation, Madam President, more than likely I'll be able to also deal with the issues of constitutionality that was raised and the concerns that Senator Lakshmi Dayal raised on the point of constitutionality with respect to the rights and privileges that would be given by the inspectors pursuant to the bill that appears before us in this current incarnation. Now, Madam President, I must say, before I begin the crux of my presentation, I had the benefit as well to sit on the Joint Select Committee in the first session of the 12th Parliament. That particular committee, Madam President, it met 18 times during the period of November 18, 2020. To June 4th, 2021. And of course, I believe Senator Lakshmi Dayal made mention of it. It was indeed for me, as a newly minted politician then, and parliamentarian, it was indeed an eye-opener and a great experience. And to that end, I must, for the public record, publicly again recognize the chair of that committee, who was the then Attorney General and now Minister Faris Al-Rawi, for his work in that committee. Madam President, I stand without fear of contradiction. There is no member who sat on that JSC can say that they were not given an opportunity by the chair of that committee to express their opinion and their views, even if it was a dissenting opinion and a dissenting view. And that is critical for the public to understand, because every single member who sat on that JSC was given an opportunity at those sittings to be able to ventilate their concerns. And then, of course, Madam President, we know how the thing go. If it is there were concerns that were so severe that was not dealt with, each member, opposite and independent, could have at that stage filed, could have issued a minority report, which when this bill was debated in the other place, we know that there was no minority report. But I would leave that there. So, Madam President, again, for the record, I want to sincerely thank the Minister, the Chairman of that committee, Minister Al-Rawi, for his contribution that he would have made in that, at the JSC committee, and of course in the creation and the work that went into the creation of this particular bill. Now, Madam President, as I indicated in the substance of my presentation, I would like to look at Part 8, which deals with inspectors. And I also previously indicated the attempt in doing this is to dispel the fears that this inspection program will trample over the rights or the rule of law as it exists. Now, Madam President, in looking at Part 8, the inspection program, the first place we have to start, Madam President, is by looking at Clause 34.4 of the bill that appears before us. Now, Clause 34.4 of this proposed bill, Madam President, what this proposed section is doing is simply, Madam President, establishing that a cannabis licensee is giving consent in advance to the entry of inspectors or any premises specified in the license. Now, this, Madam President, is simply ensuring that inspectors are given the powers to carry out their roles and functions to ensure there is full compliance, Madam President, with the cannabis law. However, Madam President, it is important to note that the powers, even of these inspectors, it is not an unlimited power, and it is set out in this bill in Clause 63. So from the get-go, when we look at inspectors, we have to remember that there's a contractual arrangement that is going to be created pursuant to Clause 34.4 between the cannabis licensee and the authority who's the one responsible or charged with the responsibility of granting the license. As with every contract that exists, Madam President, parties to a contract, upon given that notice, we all know it is up to the party to that contract to decide whether they want to follow through with this contract or not. And therefore, any person applying for a license is fully aware that they are granting consent in advance pursuant to Clause 34.4, Madam President, to the inspectors. Now, Madam President, the question, of course, now is whether or not this is good law by giving this advance consent. And I have to say for the record, respectfully, Madam President, it is my submission that it is good law. For example, not too long ago, Madam President, we were here as a Senate looking at the Special Economic Zones Act 2022. What you would notice is that there was a similar provision. So there is an alignment of law position in this current bill, Madam President, and the regime of inspectors, Madam President, that was created in the Special Economic Zones Act 2022. If particularly for the benefit of my colleagues, if we look at Section 53.5 of the said SEZ Act, what we would note is that there's a similar regime or a similar program of inspection and responsibilities and roles of inspectors that are created. So firstly, in answering whether or not the creation of this inspection program is good law, I have to say of course it is, because firstly, we have an alignment of law position. As legislators, we're ensuring that all of the pieces, as the previous Attorney General used to say, and even the tagline at the Office of the Attorney General speaks about bringing the pieces together. This law does not depart from what is already in existence, because again, it is in alignment with what similar systems that would have already been created, as we would have seen in Section 53.5 of the SEZ. Now, Madam President, moving from that, so I answered the first question, is this good law? And I gave one reason why. If you may permit me now, Madam President, to look at the roles and the powers of the inspectors. In looking at the roles and powers of the inspectors, Madam President, it will take us to Clause 62 of the bill that appears before us. In a nutshell, Madam President, the roles of the inspectors, it states, only inspectors established under Clause 58.1 of the bill will be able to conduct inspections. Inspectors will embody a high level of competence as prescribed in the legislation, that they will be trained and will have the requisite qualifications established by the authority, and this, Madam President, is dealt with in Clause 58.2 of the bill that appears before us. Now, this begs the question, Madam President, by allowing inspectors to enter a person's property, seize belongings, and seize belongings, etc., are we breaching any constitutional rights? And Madam President, respectfully, I want to state for the record that this government is certainly cognizant of Section 4 of the Constitution. And as responsible legislators, Madam President, we certainly would not advance any piece of law that certainly departs from the rights and privileges afforded to our citizens via Section 4 of the Constitution. I know Senator Lakshmi Dayal spoke about, she hoped that she doesn't hear about Surat, but Surat to this point still remains the law as it relates to looking at instances or looking at when we are passing laws that will affect people's rights and freedoms. This can only be justified, Madam President, by looking at the legitimate aim of the law. So Surat, until the courts say otherwise, it remains the law. So, Madam President, in looking at inspectors and looking at that regime of inspectors that were created, it is fair we as legislators, and on this side, we would have certainly considered the Section 4 provision of the Constitution. We would have considered case law, even as it relates to Surat, looking at the legitimate aim of why inspectors in this particular program, why certain rights and privileges, not privileges, but certain responsibilities are placed on their shoulder. And the legitimate expectation, Madam President, of creating such a regime is of course, we are looking at inspectors being the ones who are solely charged with the responsibility of ensuring that the license which is granted is in no way breached. The inspectors are the ones who will be who in essence would be the ones responsible for doing the site visits, for being able to accrue evidence that if indeed there is a breach of or there's a criminal activity existing, then of course this is what would provide evidence in which we can then tap into other pieces of legislation, criminal law, and charge the parties accordingly, depending on what the offense is committed. So, Madam President, certainly in taking into consideration the Surat provisions, taking into consideration Section 4 of the Constitution, we have considered all of that. But based on what we are attempting to create today, we would have failed as legislators if we did not ensure that inspectors had certain rights to be able to enter into premises, into property in which cannabis is being manufactured or dispensed. Because certainly we would not be regulating the industry. We would be granting license to every Tom, Dick and Harry and just allowing them to do whatever they want. You understand? So, Madam President, respectfully, Surat, and I will say that again, we would have considered some of those provisions, looking at the legitimate aim of why we would have created this particular regime of inspectors. And I want to at least, for the benefit of the listening public, understand this is rarely the purpose. It is not that we're a government who are oblivious to the rights of our citizens. It is not that we want to trample on a man's rights, but it's simply because it's mechanisms that we have put into place in order to ensure that we are able to truly regulate this industry. Now, Madam President, on the point of proportionality side, we have checks and balances. These checks and balances, Madam President, with regards to Clause 34(4), particularly the licensee, Madam President, as we have seen, or as we will see in that particular clause, has consented as a condition upon receipt of such license to all the powers of the inspectors, which I already alluded to, by respecting the law of contract, Madam President. We must understand that a contractual relationship would have been created, and I know I alluded to that already, between the licensee and the Cannabis Authority. Now, Madam President, within this law, I respectfully submit there is also due process within the bill. For instance, Madam President, if we look at Clause 63(1)(h) in particular, this states, Madam President, an inspector appointed under this Act shall, for the purpose of the enforcement of this Act, have the power to direct the temporary suspension of any activity which he reasonably believed to be in contravention of this Act or breach of terms and conditions of the license. But it goes on to say, a licensee can pursue the avenue of Clause 62(3)(c) by an appeal under 67 of the or judicial review. So that's 67 in the current clause 67 in the current bill, or judicial review, and clause 62(6), Madam President, the licensee will have the right to submit explanations or objectives within 7 days of the issuance of a report. Now, why am I dealing with due process that exists within the parameters of the bill? Of course, that is for the benefit of the public to understand that certainly this would have also been a consideration of us, and by ensuring due process exists, it's a way to be able to deal with if an instance someone believes that they are treated wrongfully by an inspector, if it is they believe that their rights in any way is being trampled upon. There are clauses and there are systems within the parameters of this bill, Madam President, that affords the ordinary citizen due process. So if there is due process in this bill, Madam President, as I would have placed on the record, if I have made an attempt to identify the legitimate aim of why we have created the inspector regime that exists in this bill, if we have considered Section 4 and case law as it relates to constitutionality. Therefore, Madam President, it is safe to say that we have crossed our T's, we have dotted our I's, and therefore we have ensured that we have not run awry of the rule of law or the constitutional rights of our citizens in the creation of this particular piece of legislation. Now, Madam President, what I want to know, so that is my attempt to deal with some of those constitutional issues. I am most certain that our learned Attorney General, my new senior in his winding up, would also add and, of course, develop more clinically the discussion as it relates to this constitutional issue. Now, Madam President, if you permit me, I would now like to go on to Clause 63 of the bill that appears before us. In this particular section, Madam President, what it says is that an inspector who is conducting an inspection may be accompanied by a police officer. Now, Madam President, understanding that inspectors are given the powers to carry out their roles and functions to ensure there is full compliance with the bill as stated earlier, it is important to note, Madam President, that these powers are similar yet hold various differences, significant differences, Madam President, when compared to those of police officers under the bill in Section 63 and 63, Clause 63 and Clause 63 of this bill. Now, Madam President, Clause 63 states that an inspector who is conducting an inspection may be accompanied by a police officer. So this may beg the question, we have inspectors, we have created this regime of inspectors. Why did we see it, or why was it necessary to now further go on to say that there are instances in which a police inspector will have to be accompanied, the use or the need of a police officer is necessary. Now, to put this into context, Madam President, it must be noted that police officers accompanying the inspector to enter and search a premises is solely at the discretion of the inspector, as we know, based on the wording of the bill. This is because the inspector, Madam President, is not mandated to go with the police officer. Therefore, when the police officer is asked to accompany the inspector, the officer at that point is playing a supplementary role in the search and seizure process. Now, however, police officers are critical to the carrying out of certain aspects of, site visits and so on pursuant to this bill. Why? Because if we apply Section 62, Madam President, if we look at particularly Section 62, even without the police, as I said before, an inspector can enter premises, right? However, what an inspector cannot do, if we look at the bill, what an inspector cannot do without being accompanied by a police officer is that he cannot enter premises unless it is within the working hours or such other times as the premises are often open to the public or otherwise in the use by the licensee. What an inspector cannot do is detain persons. What an inspector cannot do is use force. So it was critical in the creation of this bill, and again, in an effort to secure the constitutional rights of our citizens, in order to ensure that inspectors do not jump out their skin and do what they ought not to do. There is a provision in this bill, Madam President, that speaks clearly to instances in which a police officer will be called upon to accompany the inspector. So the inspectors, Madam President, for the benefit of the listening public, we need to, again, I want to reiterate, even though they are given roles and responsibilities under this particular bill, it is not as if they are unlimited powers. And what we have done, we have built, what this bill does, Madam President, is that it also builds in processes to ensure that even an inspector, there is a check and balance on that inspector. In the instance of police officers, Madam President, accompanying said officer. And as I said before, I would have identified the instances where police officers particularly would be called upon is when the inspector, of course, wants to visit a premise outside of working hours, if there's a need to use force, or if, Madam President, there's a need to detain persons. Of course, those would be the instances in which police officers would most certainly be called upon. Now, in Clause 63 of the bill which appears before us, Madam President, we also see that there is a warrant, a search warrant provision that is provided. And this, again, Madam President, is another mechanism of due process which exists in the bill that appears before us. And again, another check and balance in ensuring that the rights of our citizens are certainly protected. Now, Madam President, we have inserted even more due process, as I said before, by the inclusion of Clause 64. And with the inclusion of this clause, Madam President, we have resorted to well-established processes and procedures such as applications to the magistrate for a warrant. And for the lawyers inside here, we understand what is the process in order to obtain a warrant. We understand that the judicial officer is going to be called upon to hear the evidence, albeit a prima facie case, and then, of course, determine whether or not a warrant is granted or not. So again, by inserting this warrant provision, it is my respectful opinion, Madam President, that we assert this is yet another mechanism, Madam President, to ensure that the rights of our citizens and the constitutional rights more so afforded to our citizens under Section 4 of the Constitution is not trampled upon. Now, I mean, of course, there are numerous cases relative to search warrants and so on. We have AG versus Williams et al., 1977-51 West Indian Reports, 264 PC. And, of course, that is just one of the many cases that would have gone on to the threshold, of course, that has to be satisfied when that application, Madam President, is being made for a warrant. Just simply to say that this warrant provision, again, in my respectful opinion, it ensures that the rights of our citizens, because of the process in which a warrant is obtained, that the rights of our citizens is taken into consideration. Now, Madam President, how much time is full time? How much time do I have?
You have 7 more minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Now, Madam President, so that being said, respectfully, I have tried in my own way, Madam President, to dispel the any concerns that persons may have that by the creation of these inspectors, that we are trampling over constitutional rights of our citizens. And as I said before, I'm sure my other colleagues will dig deeper into that point as this debate continues. Now, Madam President, as I continue my contribution, I recall in preparation for this particular debate, I did some reading on a black market cannabis. And of course, you know, the reality is the more we try to regulate things and put systems in place, we have to be cognizant that it gives the smart man and smart woman out there ideas to still see how they can find ways in order to circumvent the system, right? Or to cheat the system. system. I recall it was the Honourable Prime Minister who used the term smartmanism. And we know very much in Trinidad and Tobago, like very much other parts of the world, smartmanism is very, very much prevalent. Now, bearing that in mind, I would have read, I recall in preparation for this. Now, of course, Madam President, this is not a concern unique to Trinidad and Tobago. It's concerns that would have faced other countries, especially countries, for example, Canada in particular, in which we have the Cannabis Authority existing and in full force. Now, actually, it was a Canadian Special Committee on COVID-19 pandemic. It was called Hot Issues Notes Public Safety Canada Cannabis Black Market, dated June 15, 2020. I just wanted to read that into the record. And
Minister, you have 5 more minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam President. What this particular report said, Madam President, is, and the government here referred to as the Canadian government, the government is also taking steps to disrupt the cannabis black market and to ensure that organized crime does not infiltrate the legal framework by working in partnership with other federal departments, provinces, territories, and as well as law enforcement. Now, we cannot, Madam President, ignore, as I said before, that even in the creation of this authority, we would have persons, for example, who cannot get a legitimate license and wants cannabis, a person who wants more cannabis than what he's qualified to get, a person who may not be able to afford the prescription and wants to get the cannabis cheaper by someone else. There would be instances where the man who is trafficking for those persons who want it for recreational purposes. These are some of the few reasons, Madam President, why we may have the creation of a black market cannabis trade creating. Why am I bringing up this, Madam President? I'm making reference to this because this, in essence, should cement in our honourable senator's mind why it was necessary for our inspectors to be given the kind of responsibilities as they have been given under the bill that appears before us. We have to be cognizant that even in regulating cannabis, we may very well be creating a avenue for black market cannabis. And as a consequence, in order to ensure that we curb, and mind you, for the record, this is not going to be a unique phenomenon in Trinidad and Tobago. It's something that Canada has already faced and other countries have faced. But what it does is that it's simply in recognizing that in the creation of this authority and stringent measures, that we may have the emergence of a black market cannabis trade. It should cement in all of our minds the necessity for us to give, as we would have done in this bill, inspectors the kinds of powers that we have given to them. This should cement in our minds why it is that police officers are critical at times pursuant to clauses in this bill to accompany an inspector, why warrant provisions are critical in this bill that appears before us. Bearing in mind, Madam President, that we may very well have, we will at some point or the other have to deal with the creation of a black market cannabis trade. So, Madam President, with those few words, I want to recommend this bill to the Senate. I do hope that the honourable senators, those opposite, would be willing to give us, the government, the support that we require in order to pass this landmark, forward-thinking, Madam President, piece of legislation which stands only, Madam President, to redound to the benefit of the people, all people, Madam President, of Trinidad and Tobago. With these few words, Madam President, I thank you.
Senator Singh.
Thank you, Madam President, for allowing me to partake in this debate today. Madam President, I must say that this legislation brought to me some distress, in the sense that a few years ago, I was totally against the use of marijuana because in my profession, I've been seeing what marijuana does to young persons. I've been seeing psychotic illness. I've been seeing admission to St. Anne's Hospital. So therefore, it caused me a little distress, and I want to just give a bit of history. So, in 2014, the CARICOM Regional Commission looked at the marijuana issue, and in 2018, the report on the Regional Commission on marijuana was published, and it was a report done by the present principal of the university, and it was entitled Wait and Exhale. And it actually looked at safeguarding our future through social and legal policing. So when those reports came out, it was, in a sense, giving me an idea that we were now about to be changing the landscape. Because in 2014, the heads of the CARICOM region met and decided that this is the time that they would look at the benefits of marijuana to the economy. And I must say, I saw initially the Prime Minister came out in 2019, in the early 2019, where he said decriminalizing marijuana is not a priority. And when he made that,